A good day to Miss Noor. My name is Kavita and I'm the group leader for this assignment, which is assignment 2, where we are required to design a lesson. My two group members are Divviya and Angeline, and we are from group 5. The topic we have chosen for this lesson is time, and this lesson is designed for students who are in year 3. This lesson that we have designed is focused on a student-centered lesson. Moving on to the next slide, this lesson will include firstly, learning outcomes, secondly, pre-activity, thirdly, main activity, fourth, post-activity, fifth, extended activity, and lastly, a theory and principle related to the lesson. Next, the learning outcomes that we have chosen under the Singapore Primary Mathematics syllabus for Year 3 are, firstly, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to tell and write time to 1 minute. This learning outcome is related to the pre-activity. Secondly, students should be able to use terms such as past and to tell the time, which is related to the main activity. These two learning outcomes are cognitive learning outcomes, whereas the third learning outcome is a non-cognitive learning outcome, which is at the end of the lesson, students should be able to reflect on their learning with a Kahoot quiz, checklist, and role play provided. This learning outcome is related to the post and extended activity. I would now be passing the next slide to Divya.
Thank you, Kavita. Now, I would be explaining about the lesson for pre-activity. Pre-activity is the first component of a lesson and teachers use it to warm up their students for the lesson. It also taps into students' prior knowledge relating to their previous topic learned. For this part, students would be given 15 minutes to complete in the pre-activity. The learning outcome is, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to tell and write time to 1 minute, whereby the success criteria is I am able to read time to the nearest minute and I am able to match and convert analog to digital time. The materials we have used here is a YouTube video, Google Slides, worksheet, pencils, and erasers. Now, moving on to the instructions for this activity. Firstly, students will answer the question the teacher asks them, such as what is AM and PM? What does the shorthand and longhand represent in a clock? This is a trigger question for their curiosity to recap their prior knowledge learned in year 2. Students are expected to answer AM is for morning and PM is for noon. After 11 AM, it's 12 PM. The shorthand is the minute hand and the long hand represents the hour hand. Second, students would be introduced to the learning outcome and success criteria for today's lesson. This is to inform them what they would be doing today. And by introducing learning outcomes, students will get to know what they're expected to learn and do. Thirdly, students would watch a video about telling time to the nearest minute. This would trigger auditory and visual learners as they learn differently. It would also grab students' attention by watching videos and not using the traditional way to teach. Now, let's take a look on how to read time with an example. This clock here shows an hour hand in between 10 and 11. So we go back and read from 10, whereby the minute hand is between 5 and 6. Now we read it as 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 26. So now we know that this clock shows 10:26. After the video, students are to think, pair, and share the information gained with their class partners. This will allow them to share their ideas and improve their communication skills. Do you know that it also develops their higher level thinking skills and it boosts students' confidence and self-esteem? Lastly, students would complete a worksheet given once the teacher has summarized the video. This is an assessment for them to master the topic that they just learned. From this, the teacher will know if students are having trouble with the chapter and if they need further explanations. This is the worksheet that students need to complete. This is an individual work. Now I would pass on to Kavita to explain the rest of the lesson.
Thank you, Divya. I will be now explaining about the main activity. The duration of this activity is 20 minutes. The learning outcome is, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to use terms such as past and to tell the time. And the success criteria are, firstly, I am able to demonstrate on a clock to show past and to of the time. Secondly, I am able to say terms such as past and to tell the time. Thirdly, I am able to write terms such as past and to correctly. The materials which will be used for this activity is an analog clock, clocks with movable hands, whiteboard, marker pen, mahjong papers, pencils, and erasers. Moving on, the instructions for this activity is, firstly, students will be asked questions based on an analog clock shown by the teacher, such as, is the minute hand past or to the hour? How many minutes past or to the hour is the minute hand? By asking questions, this will trigger students' thinking in order for them to move on to the next part of the activity. Next, each student will be given clocks with movable hands. Students are to represent different times to the nearest minute on their own clock. Then, students will discuss with a friend next to them whether the minute hand is past or to the hour in different times. When students discuss with their friends, they are able to share and compare their thoughts about the activity, which will result in them thinking abstractly. After that, students will be paired up by the teacher. Each pair would need to move the hands on the clock to represent particular times, written by the teacher on the whiteboard. For example, 4 minutes to 4, 24 minutes to 8, and 24 minutes past 8. Then, each pair is required to go to another pair and check if they have gotten the same answers. Once done, students will be asked to be grouped up by the teacher. Each group will consist of 3 to 4 students. Each group will be provided with a mahjong paper by the teacher. On the mahjong paper, drawings of analog clocks with its hands on a particular time have been drawn. Each group is required to write, using a pencil, the correct analog time under each clock using terms such as past and to. Once completed, each group will be required to come in front of the class and present what they have written under 2 or 3 analog clocks. The reason why this activity is done in groups is because students will be able to critically think and brainstorm with one another on how to answer the particular question. They are interacting with their peers and therefore can learn different academic ideas from one another. They can also assist one another and co-construct knowledge. Next, this is the mahjong paper which will be provided to students where they will need to write the correct analog time underneath each clock using terms such as past or to. I would now be passing the next slide to Angeline.
Thank you, Kavita. Now, I'll be explaining about the post activity. Post activity usually happens at the end of the lesson. A post listening activity represents a follow up to the listening activity and aims to utilize the knowledge gained from listening for the development of other skills such as speaking or writing. The duration for this activity will be 10 minutes. The learning outcome for this activity is, at the end of the lesson, students should be able to reflect on their learning with the Kahoot quiz, role play, and checklist provided. This is where students achieve the non-cognitive learning outcome for this lesson. Whereas the success criteria is, I am able to understand all parts of this lesson. The materials used for this post activity would be Kahoot quiz, iPad, checklist, pencils, and erasers. Now, moving on to the instruction of this activity, the students will be playing a Kahoot quiz by using the iPad provided, and the topic is time. Why do students need to play a quiz in order to understand the lesson? This is a part on how teachers can access their student, which is by giving out quizzes, and it would also help the students by letting them know which level they are based on the high score that they got in the quiz. Research also shows that by incorporating games in the classroom, students' participation increases. Next, students will be provided with a checklist to reflect on their understanding. By doing a checklist, it can help students feel in control and hold them accountable by removing obstacles to success. This will be the Kahoot quiz given to students, and the link will be at the description box. And this will be the checklist provided to students. For extended activity, students will be doing a role play and would have to present next week in class. Role play during a class can get very interesting, and it also makes the class more fun. By asking students to do a role play, it can help them develop new skills and concepts. By this, they can also help students see the relevance of the content for handling real-world situations. Here are the scenarios students need to role play on. There are a total of 4 scenarios for this activity as stated below. An example for this scenario, since it's morning, students can act out, for example, by brushing his or her teeth in the morning or having breakfast to represent the time. Next, we will be explaining on a theory and principle related to the lesson. Moving on to the next slide, I will be explaining about Lev Vygotsky's social constructivist theory, as this is the theory most appropriate for our lesson. Vygotsky's theory states that knowledge is related to past experiences and individuals learn from one another. This theory is relevant to students' development as students work in pairs. They are interacting with people and therefore can learn different academic ideas from one another. Moving on, assessment of learning is used mostly in constructivist classrooms. It's an approach to teaching and learning that creates feedback, which is then used to improve students' performance. Students become more involved in the learning process and from this gain confidence in what they are expected to learn and to what standard. In this theory, scaffolding and prior knowledge is important because the more we understand about what students already think and the more we help them engage their prior understanding, the more likely they are to learn well and the less likely they are to misinterpret the materials in their courses. Lastly, reflective learning is a way of allowing learners to step back from their learning experiences, helping them to develop critical thinking skills and improve future performance by analyzing what they have learned and how far they have come. Now, I'll be passing on to Divviya to explain about the principles related to the lesson.
Thank you, Angeline. The principle involved here is the child-focused teaching style. We decided to opt for this principle because we want our students' participation. In this principle, we designed the lesson such that they will be working in pairs and groups. This is to ensure the teacher takes on the role of the facilitator and the students are in charge of their own learning. This could be visible in the pre-activity, main activity, and also the extended activity, where they think, pair, share, and work in groups. Moving on, we also have included inquiry-based learning or questioning and answering techniques in their lesson. This occurs during the pre-activity and main activity, where we ask questions to trigger their curiosity. By this way, they get to share their opinions as well. Lastly, providing immediate descriptive feedback and direction to students allows them to know their mistakes and what changes they need to make in their learning, which is usually done in the post-activity. To conclude our presentation, it's evident that our lesson is a student-centered classroom. That is all from us and thank you for listening to our presentation. Have a great day.